Welcome to this PreCalculus Unit 3 Study Guide Review. At the end of this video, if you find any solution to be incorrect, just reach out to me and I will make that correction. So let's start with the first question. So the first question, we have that graph, and then if you read that question carefully, saying that given the portion of this graph of a periodic function, f of x shown above, what is the smallest value that the period could have? So in this case now, I know that I have to look for a pattern, right? And then to easily do this, I would advise that you look at the this point right here, and then you look at the other point right here too, which is the minimum point right there. And then all I would do in that case is to look at what this value will be. So this value will be -1, and then of course this value is going to be equals to 5. And then to find your period for that one, all we have to do is to say 5 minus -1. And then in this case, this one is going to be 5 plus 1, and it's going to be equals to 6. And that option is going to be option B. Now let's move to question number 2. So for question number 2, we are given a table, and then it's saying that for selected value of a periodic function p, they told us that that function is periodic, are given in that table. It is known that the period is 7. Based on this, let's determine the composition function. Now, if you remember from one of our class, that we said that if a function is periodic, this will be satisfied, which means f of x plus or minus k times the period is equals to same thing as f of x. So which means that your k is the condition that your k must be an integer. So it must be an integer, whether positive numbers or negative numbers. Now what I'm going to do in this question real quick is to use that definition right there. So what am I going to do? So to do this, let me start by looking for p of 4. So let's go find p of 4. And then if you look right here real quick, can you see 4? No, I can't see 4. So I have to put my period into consideration. So this one will be p of, I know that 11 minus my period is going to give me 4. So which means in this case now, all I have to do, because I put my period into consideration, which is 7, and then in this case now, all this one is going to be is just going to be p of that 11. It's just going to be p of 11. And then if you look at the graph, do you have p of 11? Of course I have p of 11, and that one will give me 3. Am I done? No, I am not done, because the question wants p of 4, and then I know that this is the same thing as p of 3, because p of 4 is now 3. So how am I going to find that? Now we have to do the same thing and check. Do we have 3 right here? No, I do not have 3. Because I do not have 3, I have to do the same thing that I've done before, and then this one is going to be put your period into consideration. So this is 10 minus 7 will give me 3. So because I put my period into consideration, you have to put your period into consideration to do that, and then this one will be p of 10. Now go back. Do you have 10 in this table? Yes, I have 10. So what is the value? So the value is going to be equals to 1. So the value is equals to 1. And that option is option A. Now let's look at question number 3. For question number 3, for this question, you have to know your unit circle. You have to know your unit circle. And then looking at your unit circle real quick, cosine of 3 pi over 4 from your unit circle is going to give you negative square root of 2 divided by 2. And that one is going to be option B. Now let's move to question number 4. For question number 4, how can we solve question number 4? So let's read question number 4. It's saying that in the xy plane, the angle is in the standard position, and then which measures this 5 over 3 pi in radian. So I know my angle to be 5 over 6 pi. And then if you read further, it says that the angle intercept at the circle intercept a circle centered at the origin with radius 4. So the radius is 4. Now it's asking me to find the coordinate where the angle intercept the circle. So I would avoid drawing this right now, but I would encourage that you draw this. Now what I'm going to do is that, remember, for the coordinate x and y, so for us to find our coordinate x and y, all we have to do, there is a formula for this one that says that r cosine of theta and then r sine of theta. That's all I'm going to use. So in this case now, I have my radius, which is 4, and then my cosine of the angle, 5 over 6 pi, and then the same radius, sine 5 over 6 pi. Now, in this case now, you have to know your unit circle. So to continue this question, you have to know your unit circle. So let's use our unit circle. So which means we have 4. What is cosine 5 over 6 pi? This one is going to give me negative square root of 3 divided by 2, and then 4 times what is sine of 5 pi over 6. This one should give you 1 over 2. So this one should give you 1 over 2. And then in this case now, if you multiply those out, then you should have negative 2 square root of 3, and then you should have this one to be 2. And that option is option A. Now let's move to question number 5. For question number 5, is saying that what is going to be the period and then what is going to be the midline. The midline is the easiest one. So the midline is just this value right here. So this is your midline value. So my midline is just positive 1. So let's eliminate options that doesn't make sense. So this doesn't make sense because the midline is negative 1. This doesn't make sense because the midline is negative 1. Now the next thing I have to do is to find the period. Now to find the period, there is a formula to find the period, and that formula is period is equals to 2 pi divided by b. And now in this case, what is my b? This is just your b. Right here is my b. So all I have to do is I have to use that to find the period. So I have to do this 2 pi divided by what? 2 over 3. And then if you divide this by using the idea of your keep, change, flip, which is the case here. Let me just do it real quick. So you have 2 pi divided by 2 over 3. So which means if you keep the first 2 pi, and then you change division to multiplication, and then you flip the second fraction, so what are you going to get when you multiply? So this one is going to be 6 pi over 2, and then at the end it's going to give me 3 pi. So which means my period is 3 pi. And what option is that? That's option B. Now let's go to question number 6. For question number 6, how do you solve question number 6? Now for question number 6, I have that graph, and then I need to solve that graph. Now the first thing I want you to remember is to remember your sine graph. So your sine graph is going to start from the midline, and then you go concave down and then concave up. So we're going to go concave down, concave up for my sine graph. And then if you think about this real quick, for my negative sine graph, how is that one going to look like? So for my negative sine graph, it means that I just have to flip, I just have to do the reflection of those concave down and concave up. So this one is going to be concave down, concave up, and then concave down. So right here, it's just going to be my negative sign. And then in this case, all we have to do now, we have to be very, very careful when we are picking our option. So if you look at this option now, this graph look like this one right here. So it's looking like what I have right here. So it looks like that. So if that looks like that, now, which means that, we do not have a phase shift, right? So in that case, I have to know that my answer should look like this, because that's a reflection across the x-axis. So my answer should look like negative a, and then I should have sine of bx, just like that. So I should have something like this, plus, let's say d, because my midline will be equal to 0, right? So in this case, what is my midline? My midline is just this right here. This is my midline. So my midline is 0. So because my midline is 0, it means that d will be equal to 0. So my d is equal to 0. That's my midline. And then I need to find out what a will be. Remember, your a is your amplitude. And then how I remember the amplitude is to take the maximum and take it away from the midline. And then if you do that real quick, what is the maximum? So the maximum right here is 3. So the maximum is 3. So I have this one to be 3 minus, what is your midline? Your midline is 0. So I have that one to be 3. So now I have my a to be equal to 3. So now I need the period. Now, if you look at this graph real quick, what will be the period? To find the period, I will just erase that. Let's find the period. To find the period, I can take away the two minimum. So I can take away this minimum from this minimum value. So if you look at that, so what will be this distance now? This distance is going to give me 4 pi. How do I get 4 pi? Just do 5 pi minus 5. So it's going to give me 4 pi. So that's my period. That's my period. Now, since I have that to be my period, let me erase this real quick so that I have, some space. Now, once that one is my period, and I know the formula for my period is 2 pi divided by b. And now my period, from what I have, is 4 pi is equals to 2 pi divided by b. Now, what do you have? If you solve for b, you have your 4 pi b is equals to 2 pi. Now, to find your b now, what are you going to do? You are going to divide both sides by what? 4 pi. And then your b is equals to what? 1 over 2. So in this case now, I have my b. And then what would this be? Now, remember I said for this question, there is no phase shift. Phase shift is just like your horizontal translation, moving left or right. So in this case now, I have my a now, which is negative. My a is 3. Then I have my negative sign. Then I have my sine. My b now is 1 over 2 times x. And then my midline is plus 0. And then if you simplify all of this, which of the following looks like that? That will be option B, as option B. Now let's go to question number 7. For question number 7 is asking that, what is the phase shift? For this one, you have to be very careful. So to get this one, just take this value and then set it to be equal to 0. So you have 2x minus pi over 2, set it to be equal to 0. And then you solve for x. So solving for x in this case now, let's add pi over 2 to both sides. And then if you do that, you have 2x is equals to pi over 2. And then you divide both sides by 2, right? So let's divide both sides by 2. Divide both sides by 2. And then what will be your x now? Your x will be pi over 4. Now be careful on this one. Is that the final answer? No, but it says that we should write it in this form, right? So if you're writing that in that form, it means that this should have been the opposite. So our answer now will have been the opposite of this right here. So it will have been the opposite of that. So which means my answer will be what? will be negative pi over 4. So my answer will be negative pi over 4. Just like that. So be careful on that one. And then question 8. Let's see how we're going to solve question 8. So to solve question 8, this is another unit circle. So for this test, you have to know your unit circle. You have to know your unit circle. So for this test, you have to know your unit circle. And the answer to this one, now from the unit circle is going to be negative square root of 3 divided by 2. And then which of these would have the same sign value? So the one that is going to have the same sign value as that is just this one, because the sign of 4 pi over 3 is the same thing as that too. So that will be the answer. You have to know your unit circle for that one. You have to know your unit circle. Now, let's go to question 9. Well, question 9 is saying that the angle theta is in the standard position with the terminal ray passing through this particular point. What is the value for theta? Now, the formula is cos theta is equals to x divided by r. And then in this case now, all I have to substitute is what I know. So this one is x, and then this one is y. So I know that my cos theta is equals to negative 3 divided by r. So I have to find out what the radius will be, right? So to find out what the radius will be, remember the formula that I gave you, that r squared is equals to s squared plus y squared. And then if you do the math real quick, then this one is going to be r squared, your x is negative 3 squared plus 4 squared, and then this one is going to be 25. And then now I want only r, then I can just take the square root of 25, and my r will be 5. So in this case, but don't forget your radius will be from the distance will be the distance from the origin, right? So the square root have to be positive. So what will be the answer to this one? Negative 3 divided by 5, and that option is going to be option D. It's going to be option D. Now let's see. It's saying which two Trix function have the value of 0 when theta is equals to pi. So if you go back to your unit circle, let's go back to our unit circle. So at our unit circle, I know that, let me just draw something real quick. So this right here is 0. This is pi over 2. This is negative 5. This is 3 pi over 2. And then we go back to 2 pi, right? So in this case now, this value at this point right here, at this point, this value is going to be negative 1 comma 0, right? And then the first one is going to mean that my my cos my cosine of phi, that one will give me negative 1. And then my sine of phi, that one will give me 0. So they are asking me for the one that's going to give me that 0, so which is sine of that. So which means that it will be the sine of pi that will give me 0. So it's not that one, is not, no, let me keep that one. So it's not A, and then it's not D. Now this one means that I have to do 1 over sine. So that one means 1 over sine. And then if you think about it real quick, 1 divided by 0 is what? Undefined. So it cannot be that. So it cannot be this one. So it can't be that. And then if you think about it real quick, which option do we have left? So it is option C, because I know that tangent is equals to sine theta over cos theta. And then because I know that my tangent pi is the same thing as my sine pi over cosine pi. So which means this one already is 0, and then this one already from the unit circle is negative 1, right? So that one is negative 1, and it will still give me 0. So that's why that option is right. Now let's go to question 11. For question 11 is asking us to actually find B. To find B, what are we going to do? So remember what I said in class, if you're going from maximum to minimum, what do? That means we're doing half of the period. So maximum to minimum is half of the period, which is the same thing as pi, this pi minus pi over 3. And then let's do the math real quick. So if you do the math, you have 1 over 2 pi minus pi over 3. That one is going to give you 2 pi over 3. And then in this case now, I want the period. Now, to find the period, in this case, what do? So just multiply both side by 2. So let's go multiply both side by 2. So I multiply both side by 2. So if I multiply both side by 2, now what do I have? I have my P is equals to 4 pi divided by 3. But now the question wants us to find, B. And I also know that this P is the same thing as 2 pi over B, which is equals to 4 pi over 3. That's what I know too. And then in this case now, I can decide to cross multiply. If I cross multiply now, I have 4 pi B is equals to 6 pi. And then I divide both sides by 4 pi. So you divide both sides by 4 pi. And then what do you have? Your B is equals to 6 pi divided by 4 pi. Now what do you see? This pi is going to cancel out this pi. And then if you simplify 6 divided by 4 to the lowest term, you have 3 over 2. And that option is going to be option B. Now let's go to question number 12. For question number 12, I'm just going to move fast on this one. So you have to put this this condition into consideration. So think about it real quick. So it's saying that if tangent is equals to that. So how are we going to solve that? Now to solve this one, all you have to do is you have to know your unit circle. So I will just jump to the answer real quick. So let me pick that one first. So if I pick tangent of 5 over 6 pi, this one is the same thing as sine 5 over 6 pi divided by cosine 5 over 6 pi. On your unit circle, the sine of 5 pi over 6 is going to give you 1 over 2. Then you divide that by the cosine of that is going to give you negative square root of 3 divided by 2. And then if you do the math real quick, this one is going to give you negative 1 square root of 3. So if you look at this now, the square root of 3, I think the square root of 3, if I'm not mistaken, that one should be 1.73 something, I'm not sure. And then if you divide that, which is, the square root of 3 is very close to 2. So which means that if I say that the square root of 3, is very close to 2, right? And I divide that by 1, it will still be within this range. So my answer to that question is going to be option D. It's going to be option D. Now let's see how to solve question number 12. Question number 13, I mean. So for question number 13, you have to be very careful on this one. You have to be very careful. So read with me. A mass is hanging vertically from a spring and is freely bubbling up and down. Now, the mass reaches the maximum point of its path twice every seconds. So in that case, my period is just 1 over 2, right? Because every second, so that my period is 1 over 2. And now what I know is that I know a formula that connects the period and B, which is P is equals to 2 pi divided by B. So in this case, this value is 1 over 2 is equals to 2 pi over B. Now I can find B. So cross multiply. If you cross multiply now, what do you have? You have your B is equals to 4 pi. So let's keep that. And then they now said, now let's keep reading. So they said that the spring changes between being stretched 3 centimeter and 11 centimeter. So I can use that to find my amplitude. Now remember that your amplitude is equal to your maximum minus your midline. And another formula for that is also your maximum minus your minimum divided by 2. So I will use the second formula. So the maximum right here is 11. Minimum is 3 divided by 2. So what do you have? This one is 8 divided by 2, and then you have 4. So which means I have the amplitude. So, and then in this case now, how am I going to write this? Of course, all the options are sine function, right? So if you look at it, each of t, so first one will be a sine of b t. So if you write this correctly, your a is 4, then you have your sine. Now what is my b? My b is 4 pi, and then multiply by t. And what option is that? And that option is going to be option C. Option C. Now let's go to question 14. For question 14, let's read question 14. So question 14 is saying that uh, a motor produce electric current and varies periodically between the maximum and the minimum. So we're given its maximum, and then we're given the minimum too. So now they now said that approximately 3 seconds passes between the two consecutive instances maximum current. So what they are saying right here means that your period is 3 seconds. So my period right there is 3 seconds. And then I have a maximum of 10, and then I have a minimum of 4. So now to pick the best answer, all I know is that I have to find the midline. So if you think about it real quick, the sine graph is going to start from the midline. So remember, your sine start from the midline, and then your cosine is going to start from the maximum. So if you look at this question carefully, you have to be very careful on this question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the midline, and then my midline is 10 plus 4 divided by 2, which is maximum plus minimum divided by 2, and that one is going to give me 7. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to match up all the answer that I have. Now let's go to this one. The maximum is right here, the maximum is right here, and then if I find that period, this looks like the period is 3, right? It looks like the period is 3, but in this case, where is the midline? The midline should be 7. So this is my midline right here, which means that this doesn't really make sense, right? So let's go to option C. For option C, if you look at this option C, and they told me that the minimum is 4. So in this case now, the maximum was 10, but the minimum was, was negative 4. So this option doesn't make sense. Now let's go to option C. For option C, the minimum right here, what is the minimum right there? So the minimum right there is going to be 4. And then the maximum right here is going to be 10. So the maximum is 10. And then look at the midline. What is the midline? The midline is 7. So this is the midline right here. And the graph is starting from the midline. So which means that this option actually makes sense. So this one actually makes sense. And that would be the answer to this question. Now we're going to see how to solve, the next question. I will see